Hi everyone and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you're new to my channel. Glad to have you here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button either way if you haven't already. It would really help me out. And also, you don't want to miss any of my great horror content that I have on my channel, that I'm trying to put out on my channel for you guys. So with that being said, we have reached the end of March, and therefore we've reached the end of my Leprechaun franchise review series. And all eight, I reviewed all 8 movies individually. Those reviews are up on my channel if you haven't seen them and you want to check them out. But in this video, we're going to wrap up the franchise with my overall thoughts and about the Leprechaun movies. And of course, the big part is the ranking. I'm going to rank all 8 of these movies from my least favorite to my favorite. This is a very interesting franchise, to say the least. I think I'll do my ranking first, and then I'll give my overall thoughts about this franchise and the movies within it. Caveat on my rankings: this was very hard. It was very hard to rank these 8 movies. I have a feeling that, like, 1 through 3, I'm pretty secure with, and I think will probably remain. But 4 through 8, really, you could throw in a bag and mix them up, and on any given week or any given month or year, they could change, and they probably will, especially since I've only watched all these once. But as of March 31st, 2025, this is the ranking I have. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, these movies are all kind of in the same bag for me. But I did go in an order for the first time watches that I'm, pretty comfortable with. Like I said, I did have to spend some time going through this and figuring out what order I was going to go with. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, starting with my ranking. So coming in last place for me is going to be this little gem right here, Leprechaun 4 in Space from 1997. I believe I gave this a rating of 6 out of 10 for Leprechaun in Space. Yeah, I don't know. This one's just on one hand, as I said in my review, I give them credit for going full on batshit crazy with this movie, because they do throw just about everything at the wall. But I don't know, it's just a little bit too out there for me. The story, I didn't think the kills were great. There's hardly any gore in this movie. It's more kind of silly and over the top, almost cartoonish as far as the kills go. They're not bloody. The visual effects and the CGI are terrible. And you don't really feel like you're in space. I didn't think the setting, the production value was all that good for this movie. Warwick Davis is still great, but again, they put a lightsaber in his hand, and I don't know, man. This was the first one when I was trying to figure out what was going to be my least favorite. There were certainly a couple of ones to consider, but I kept coming back to Leprechaun in Space, and I don't know, maybe this one will improve upon rewatch. I understand that it's silly and it's supposed to be batshit crazy, but this is just a little too much for me. It just doesn't quite work for me. It's not completely unwatchable. I will watch it again at some point in years to come, but that had to be my number 8, my least favorite of the franchise. Coming in next is going to be, I think, Leprechaun Back to the Hood right here is going to be number 7 for me. I also gave this a 6 out of 10 rating. Just kind of looking at my notes, I don't know, the story was just kind of boring. It was uninteresting. Not really much happens here. It's the same recycled storyline where they go back to the leprechaun looking for his gold. The characters are forgettable. The story is forgettable. It's really cheap and bad looking, especially the effects that they use. The scene transitions and editing aren't great. Yeah, I don't know. This movie's just not great. There was some humor that as I mentioned in my review, it did work for me a bit. It does have a fair amount of blood and gore. I like the cop getting his leg ripped off and how they did that. So there are some decent things about it, but for this franchise overall, I couldn't really put it any higher than this right now. So Leprechaun Back to the Hood from 2003, which is Warwick Davis's last performance as the Leprechaun in this franchise. He's still good. I like the look of him and stuff, but overall as a movie, I can't really put it any higher than this. So that's my number 7. Number 6 is going to be a lot of people's least favorites. And that's the last one in this 7 Blu-ray pack here. And that's Leprechaun Origins from 2014. And I can understand why a lot of people don't like this movie. I think for me, because we were coming off of 6 movies that were all kind of the same in tone, I was ready for a change up, so I gave it credit for that. This is a more serious movie. There's not a lot of humor in this movie. I mean, there's a little, but I mean, the tone of this movie is a lot more serious than the other movies. The production value I thought looked good. Set in Ireland, I thought worked for me. There's some great overhead shots of the landscape. I think the acting is pretty good. One of the better acted movies in this franchise. The biggest problem, and this is, I think, a lot of people's problem with the movie and why they rank it last for them, and number 6 for me, is this isn't a Leprechaun movie. I mean, this is a creature feature. It's kind of a generic 2010s creature feature, a Wendigo movie. Doesn't look anything like a Leprechaun. They use Hornswoggle, the WWE wrestler, but they really could have used anybody. I mean, this isn't a Leprechaun. So I agree with a lot of people there. That was a fail on that part. The characters are pretty dreadful in terms of their decision making and just overall likability. Even though, like I said, the acting is pretty decent. The kills are solid, but there's some bad editing and bad CGI blood and gore effects. It's just not all that well executed, interesting. So yeah, I get it. This is the least Leprechaun movie of this franchise, frankly. So it's my number 6. Excuse me. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the first Leprechaun in the Hood. Leprechaun in the Hood here from 2000. Yeah, this one I gave 6.5 out of 10 to. Actually, I think I gave Leprechaun Origins 6.5 out of 10 as well. This one from 2000, Leprechaun in the Hood. I like the kills in this movie. They were in big improvement, especially from In Space, the movie before this. The blood and gore aspect is pretty good here. Leprechaun makes people's torsos explode in this movie. He puts his hand through one of the characters, which was pretty cool. It's also the first movie in the franchise that really has any sort of connection to previous movies in the franchise, having to do with getting back to four-leaf clovers, being a factor that can put the Leprechaun down here, which was a follow-up to the third movie. The four-leaf clovers was a connection to the original. Oh, and then the Leprechaun statue amulet. Sorry, I was trying to read through my notes here and I kind of got lost. Keeping him at bay as well. The amulet, I should say, from part 3 that keeps him at bay, and him being a statue to start with. So there's some connective tissue that I liked. The end of the movie has a nice twist that I didn't see coming. Leprechaun did seem a little bit meaner, a little bit crueler in this movie, which I liked, especially after... Again, this movie benefits a lot from Leprechaun in Space being the one right before it, frankly. And Leprechaun has his great rhymes that he brings back from part 3 that we kind of lost in part 4. That being said, it doesn't feel like a Leprechaun movie. It feels like a Leprechaun's a guest star in this movie. That this was a movie focusing on these 3 rappers, these 3 main characters. I don't think the acting's particularly great in this movie. It's just another weak attempt to put the Leprechaun in a new setting, and use in a blaxploitation sort of movie as opposed to a slasher movie. The comedy was lame. Yeah, I don't know. This one is okay. It's a middle of the road Leprechaun movie, and like I said, I think it benefits for me a lot from Leprechaun in Space being the one before this. So, and then now we got number 4, which I also gave a 6.5 out of 10. three of these movies I gave a 6.5 out of 10 for in the middle here. And my number 4 is going to be Leprechaun 2 right here from 1994. Yeah, Leprechaun 2, the thing that stands out about this one is how bad the acting is, especially by the two main characters, Siobhan Durkin, specifically as Bridget. I did kind of like the story direction they went for. I like the character of Morty to a certain extent in this movie. I like the St. Patrick's Day setting and vibes that are in this movie, including a scene at a bar where they get Leprechaun to drink and kind of forget what he's doing and get drunk. That was fun and enjoyable part of the movie. The lawnmower kill was a fun kill in the movie. It was pretty good gore and makeup effects in this movie, but the human characters, as I said, they're rough. Both from an acting and writing standpoint, they aren't particularly interesting. There's some bad cheesy effects for some of the kills in the movie. The movie's really just a relaunch of the first movie. Again, as would be the case with this franchise, they don't connect at all. So it's not really a true sequel. Yeah, I don't know. Leprechaun 2 is just kind of there. It doesn't stand out really all that much. I mean, even something like Leprechaun in Space, it's bad. It's worse than Leprechaun 2, but you don't forget it. This movie's kind of forgettable. Other than those things I mentioned, I did like the St. Patrick's Day setting and vibes going on in the one character of Morty. I thought was interesting. But other than that, I don't know. The number 4 for Leprechaun 2. So now we get into my top 3, and I think these are the ones that'll probably stay how they are. Even upon rewatch, we'll see what happens. But my number 3, I gave a 7 out of 10 to. It's a lot of people's favorite, or one of their favorites, and that's Leprechaun 3, the one where Leprechaun's in Vegas. I know it might have sounded like I was a little harsh on this movie. It might have been the one movie that I had, because I've heard from other people how good it was in this franchise, and I think I sort of lost sight the fact that this franchise isn't that good overall, so I think my expectations might have been the highest for this movie. But upon kind of thinking it over and stuff, this is a pretty good effort as a Leprechaun movie, because Leprechaun being in Las Vegas with all the coins and the money and the gambling does make a lot of sense. So the Las Vegas was fun. The location of it I liked. From the casino and the pawn shop, the magic shows. Has a lot of Las Vegas vibes going on. Warwick Davis is great again in this movie. One of his better portrayals as Leprechaun, perhaps. The rhyming dialogue here is great. I think the kills are a bit better than they were in Part 2. And even Part 1 to a certain extent. There was more blood and gore here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Some of the makeup and gore effects are pretty good, especially as one of our characters towards the end basically blows up into a balloon. You know, you have Caroline Williams here, which is fun. She does a good job. But again, it doesn't connect to the other movies. I wasn't overly enamored with the main characters as far as them trying to be funny. Or that being that well acted, frankly. Other than Caroline Williams and Warwick Davis, who I think do a pretty good job. I just think the acting's pretty bad otherwise by the human characters. Pretty paper-thin characters. The comedy's a bit outdated, very 90s. And they keep changing the lore and it weakens this overall franchise because they keep changing the lore, and at least in the first 4 movies. Then they get back to some of it as we go on. But yeah, Leprechaun 3 is pretty solid. I'll give you that. That's why I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's my number 3 in the franchise. Number 2, and I don't know if this is going to be a surprise to some people. Probably not if you've watched my reviews. But number two is going to be the original Leprechaun from 1993 here with Jennifer Aniston. This is a pretty solid movie. I like the characters for the most part, the main characters. You know, Warwick Davis's initial portrayal of the Leprechaun is very good. He brings a lot to the role that I don't think the movie would be as good without, as I mentioned in my individual review for this. I like the 4-leaf clover aspect, keeping him at bay, as far as keeping him like in this, not coffin, but like this box that he's initially in. I think it's fun, and it works within the horror comedy aspect and context. I think it struck a pretty good balance between wit and humor and some more evil, creepy moments where the leprechaun is kind of sneaking around in the shadows kind of thing. I think the acting's pretty decent, especially for a B horror movie. Um, Pretty good death sequence for the leprechaun at the end where he melts in this well and he comes out of it. I kind of like that, and I like the farmhouse setting. So yeah, the original Leprechaun from 1993 is a really solid Leprechaun movie for this franchise especially. But if you watch my last review, you know my favorite Leprechaun movie and the one that I'll probably go back to the most is the one that I have on the individual Blu-ray, and that's Leprechaun Returns from 2018. Who would have thought? The last movie in the franchise and the one that doesn't, where Warwick Davis doesn't play the Leprechaun. However, with that being said, I enjoyed the comedy the most out of this one, not just from the Leprechaun, but even some of the main characters. I felt like some of the main characters, the female main characters, they kind of have their own personalities, and the characters have a little bit more than what we're used to in this franchise. And the fact that this connects very well to the original, and that was my favorite thing about it, is they actually gave us a true sequel in this franchise and actually had a strong connective tissue with references and even having one of the original characters from the original movie, that being Ozzy, coming back for this movie. And he does a great job in this movie, I thought. I actually like the main female characters, as I said, because the acting is serviceable. It's not overly great, but I think the characters are written better. As I said, they have their own personalities and their own quirks to them that worked for me. The kills are great. It's the goriest of the whole franchise, which I liked. Some of the kills are creative. There is some CGI as well that I don't care for, but and the two main male characters are pretty pointless in this movie. But I don't know. I liked returning to our setting of the farmhouse as well. Yeah, I don't know. This movie just worked the best for me out of all the Leprechaun movies, from comedy to kills to characters, to the gore, and the connective tissue to the first one being a true sequel. That's why this is number one, my favorite, that I gave an 8 out of 10 to from 2018. And I didn't even mention the fact that the guy that plays Leprechaun, who's not Warwick Davis, but rather Lyndon Porco as the Leprechaun. I think he does a really great job, and he kind of made the character his own, but certainly it was certainly he used a lot from what Warwick Davis did as well to keep the essence of it. I love all that stuff, and that's why this is easily for me. I shouldn't say easily, but it's number one for me in this franchise. Leprechaun Returns from 2018. Sorry, I know I probably basically gave a review for each of those as I went through them. I got to learn to just give the movies, and if you want why, you got to go to my individual reviews. But either way, just kind of a brief synopsis. As far as this overall franchise goes, I can say leaving this franchise that I'm probably on a yearly basis around St. Patrick's Day, I'm probably going to be committed to watching the original from 1993 and the last one, Leprechaun Returns from 2018. I think those two make a pretty nice double bill. And I think that's probably going to be a yearly tradition for me. As far as the other ones go, I might try to mix them in here or there after 2 or 3 years. Maybe like in 2 years I throw in Leprechaun 2 with those. Then the next year I do Leprechaun. Go through. What am I trying to say here? I don't know. I'll watch them every 3 or 4 years, the other ones that aren't Leprechaun or Leprechaun Returns is what I'm trying to say. It is a B horror movie franchise, so you got to keep that in mind. It's nothing earth-shattering here, nothing great, nothing scary, certainly. Although I will say that I think the Leprechaun works best from a horror standpoint in the two that I mentioned, the original Leprechaun and Leprechaun Returns. All the other ones, he's more or less... he's completely in the light. He's much more of a jokester, and the comedy's much more there. I don't know. It's not the worst horror franchise I don't think out there, but it is in contention. There's just a lot of movies that are just sort of meh. And like I said, I could do this ranking again in 5 years, and parts 4 through 8 might change up quite a bit, but 1 through 3 probably won't. Leprechaun 3, the original Leprechaun, and Leprechaun Returns are pretty solid in those top three. So I don't want to go too much over 20 minutes, so I'm going to wrap things up there. I think Warwick Davis is certainly the best part of this franchise. I think there are some cool Leprechaun lore kind of ideas there with the rhyming. Some of the kills are great. The gore is great in certain movies. And the comedy works in certain movies. So overall, guys, it's an interesting franchise. Very much a B horror movie franchise. But anyway, go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of my ranking, how you would rank them. I'd be interested in hearing from your least favorite to your favorite. Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel, as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of my upcoming horror movie series or any of my horror content. We're going to be getting back into the 1980s horror series, so in a couple of days, back into 1981, I'll have a review dropping to start that again. So with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this Leprechaun franchise. I hope I either convinced you to or to not watch these movies. But I would recommend the first one from 1993 and Leprechaun Returns at the very least, as far as a recommendation from this franchise. So with all that being said, thank you for watching. Hope you're doing well. Had a good March. And as always, stay scared. Bye.